Nobody expected it to happen like that. Not in a private meeting, not behind closed doors, but live on television in front of millions of people, with the cameras rolling and the pressure turned all the way up. Deion Sanders looked straight ahead and said what most fathers would never dare to say about their own son. No filter, no protection, no soft words, just raw honesty about Shedeur Sanders and the mistakes he still needs to fix if he wants to survive at the next level. And that's what made the moment so uncomfortable. This wasn't a proud dad hyping his kid. This wasn't a motivational speech. This was a legendary NFL icon calling out his own son's flaws in real time, with analysts watching, fans reacting, and Todd Monken sitting right there listening to every word. Deion didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't defend. He didn't deflect. He basically said, yes, he works hard, but he still has issues that can't be ignored. Think about how rare that is. Most celebrity parents go out of their way to protect their kids from criticism. They blame the system. They blame the coaches. They blame the media. Deion did the opposite. He put the spotlight directly on Shedeur and made it clear that work ethic alone isn't enough if you're still making costly mistakes. That's not normal behavior. That's not PR. That's pressure. And instantly, the internet exploded. Some people respected it. Others thought it was too harsh. A father calling out his own son on national TV. That felt personal, almost brutal. Fans started asking the same question over and over. Why would Deion do this publicly instead of privately? Was he trying to motivate him? Or was he sending a message to the league? Or maybe was he trying to separate himself from the narrative that he's been protecting Shedeur this whole time? Because let's be honest, that's been the rumor for years. Ever since Shedeur started playing under his dad, people have claimed he's been sheltered, that he's had it easy, that the system was built around him, that Deion was pulling strings behind the scenes. So when Deion goes on live TV and openly points out his son's flaws, it completely destroys that story. It tells the world, I'm not here to save him, I'm here to challenge him. And that's what made this moment so powerful. It wasn't just a comment, it was a public test. A father putting his son under the same pressure as everyone else, maybe even more. Almost like Deion was saying, if you can't handle this, you're not ready for what's coming next. Because in the NFL, nobody protects you. Nobody cares who your dad is. Nobody holds your hand. You either perform or you disappear. And by calling Shedeur out on live TV, Deion didn't embarrass him. He exposed him to the exact environment he's about to live in. But here, where it gets interesting, that moment didn't weaken Shedeur's image. It made it stronger. Because instead of looking like a protected kid with a famous last name, he suddenly looked like someone being held to an even higher standard than everyone else. And that raised a much bigger question. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. Was this really criticism? Or was it Deion's way of preparing his son for the most unforgiving stage of his life? Having a famous last name sounds like a blessing. More connections, more attention, more opportunities. From the outside, it looks like a shortcut to success. But for Shedeur Sanders, that last name has been more of a curse than a gift. Because the moment people hear Sanders, they stop seeing the player and start seeing the legacy. And that changes everything. Most young quarterbacks get judged on what they do. Shedeur gets judged on who his father is. Every throw, every decision, every mistake is compared to Deion Sanders before it's even compared to other players his age. He's never just a prospect. Deion's son. He's never just developing. Not living up to the name. That kind of pressure doesn't motivate everyone. For a lot of players, it breaks them. Because here's the reality nobody talks about. When you have a legendary parent, you don't get extra patience. You get less. Coaches expect more. Teammates expect more. Fans expect greatness from day one. There's no room for learning curves, no room for bad games, no room for he's still growing. You're supposed to be ready immediately simply because of your bloodline. And the worst part? People assume everything is handed to you, that you didn't earn your spot, that you didn't grind, that someone made a phone call for you behind the scenes, that your success is artificial. So even when you do succeed, it doesn't feel real to them. It feels manufactured, like it doesn't count. That's the trap Shedeur has been stuck in his entire career. If he plays well, people say it's because of his dad. If he struggles, they say he's overrated. There's no winning. He's either protected or exposed, never just respected. And that creates a dangerous situation mentally, because now you're not just trying to improve. You're trying to prove you deserve to exist in the conversation at all. Every practice becomes an audition. Every game becomes a trial. You're not chasing progress. You're chasing validation. And that's exhausting. What most people don't understand is that being Deion Sanders' son doesn't give you confidence. It gives you a target on your back. Teammates watch you closer. Opponents want to embarrass you more. Media wants a bigger story from you. You're not allowed to blend in. You're either a headline or a disappointment. And that's why the Nepo baby narrative never made sense. If anything, Shedeur has had to work twice as hard just to be seen as half as real. He doesn't get the benefit of doubt. He gets the burden of expectation. He doesn't get time. He gets comparisons to a Hall of Famer. Most players get to build their identity slowly. Shedeur was born with one already written for him, and instead of being free to grow into his own player, he spent his entire career trying to escape a shadow that's impossible to outrun. That's the real curse of the famous last name. Not pressure, not fame, not attention. It's never being allowed to fail like a normal human being. What the cameras capture is the highlights, the touchdowns, the reactions, the interviews, the moments that fit neatly into clips and social media posts. But the real story of Shedeur Sanders doesn't live on television. It lives in places nobody is filming. Empty facilities, quiet meeting rooms, late nights when there's no crowd to impress and no headlines to chase. Because the grind isn't glamorous. There's no dramatic music when you're rewatching the same bad play for the 10th time, trying to understand what went wrong. There's no applause when you stay after practice to run extra drills while everyone else is already heading home. There's no viral clip of you studying film while your phone is face down and your friends are out living life. That part doesn't sell, so the media ignores it. And that's exactly why the narrative around Shedeur has always been off. People talk about talent, they talk about genetics, they talk about systems and coaches, but they never talk about the discipline, the habits, the routines, the boring, repetitive work that actually builds a quarterback, because that stuff doesn't fit into a hot take. From what teammates and coaches have said, Shedeur is one of the last people to leave the building. Extra meetings, extra questions, extra attention to details most fans would never even notice. Defensive tendencies, blitz patterns, subtle coverage shifts, the small things that separate a flashy player from a real field general. And here's the part that really gets overlooked. When you grow up around greatness, you don't get inspired by highlights. You get haunted by standards. Being around Deion Sanders doesn't teach you how to celebrate. It teaches you how to prepare. It teaches you that reputation means nothing if you don't back it up every single day. So for Shedeur, work was never optional. It was the baseline. While fans argue online about whether he's ready, he's already dissecting his own weaknesses. Footwork, pocket awareness, decision-making under pressure. Not because someone told him to, but because he knows those flaws will get exposed at the next level. The NFL doesn't care about potential. It cares about execution. And he knows that better than anyone. The funny thing is, the same people who call him protected have no idea how isolated that grind actually is. There's no special treatment when you're alone with film. No famous last name when you're getting corrected by coaches. No privilege when you're the one staying late while others clock out. That work doesn't care who you are. It only rewards who shows up. And that's what never gets shown. The version of Shedeur that isn't performing for anyone. The one that's frustrated with himself after mistakes. The one that rewatches losses more than wins. the one that treats every game like a lesson instead of a victory lap. So when people say he overhyped, they're really admitting something else. They've only seen the surface. They've only seen the public image. They've never seen the foundation. And the foundation is built on a level of preparation most players never reach. The moment the draft ended, the story was already written. Not by teams, not by coaches, but by the media. The headline wasn't about opportunity. It wasn't about fit. It was about the fall. About how Shedeur Sanders supposedly dropped. As if the draft was some moral scoreboard that revealed hidden truths about a player's worth. As if sliding a few rounds suddenly meant something was wrong with him. That narrative spread fast. Analysts started framing it like a warning sign, like the league had quietly exposed him. Rumors suggested teams weren't sold. Reports claimed front offices had concerns. And just like that, a complicated process got simplified into one lazy conclusion. If he wasn't taken earlier, he must not be that good. But anyone who actually understands how the draft works knows how misleading that is. The draft isn't a ranking of talent. It's a negotiation. It's strategy. It's teams balancing needs, contracts, future picks, and politics. Quarterbacks get overvalued, then undervalued, then overanalyzed to the point where nobody trusts their own judgment anymore. Careers shift because of one workout, one interview, one rumor that never gets verified. And in Shedeur's case, the noise was louder than usual. Playing for Deion Sanders already made him controversial. Some teams didn't want the media attention. Some didn't want the narrative. Some probably didn't want the pressure of drafting the most talked-about name in college football. That's not about ability. That's about risk management. But the media turned that into a personal flaw. They spoke about the drop like it was punishment, like the league was sending a message, like he had failed some invisible test. And that's where the story became dangerous. Because now every future performance would be filtered through that one moment. If he played well, it was surprising. If he struggled, it was expected. What got ignored is the part that actually matters. He still got drafted. He still entered the league. He still walked into a locker room with the same opportunity as everyone else. The only real difference was the chip on his shoulder. Instead of confidence, he got doubt. Instead of praise, he got skepticism. And instead of comfort, he got pressure. But maybe that was the worst thing the narrative creators could have done. Because if there's one thing that fuels elite athletes, it's disrespect. Being overlooked doesn't weaken them. It sharpens them. It gives every rep more meaning, every meeting more urgency, every mistake more motivation. So while the media kept talking about the fall, Shedeur treated it like a reset. No entitlement, no bitterness, just a reminder that nothing would be given. Everything would have to be earned. And that's the irony. The draft drop was supposed to expose him. Instead, it stripped away every illusion and left him with the one thing that actually matters in the NFL. Hunger. Once the draft narrative started fading, a new label took its place. System quarterback. It's one of the most convenient insults in football. It sounds intelligent, but it doesn't really mean anything. And somehow, it got attached to Shedeur Sanders almost overnight. The idea was simple. He didn't succeed because of skill, he succeeded because the system made him look good. Most of this came from his time at Colorado. Critics argued that the offense was designed to protect him, that it simplified reads, that it gave him easy throws. And then came the favorite talking point of all, Travis Hunter. According to the narrative, Hunter was doing all the real work, and Shedeur was just the guy throwing the ball. But that argument falls apart the moment you actually understand what quarterbacks do. A system can suggest plays. It can create spacing. It can design routes. But it can't make decisions. It can't read defenses. It can't adjust protections. It can't feel pressure. It can't choose when to take a risk or when to throw the ball away. That part is always on the quarterback. Calling someone a system QB is really just a way to avoid saying they're prepared. Because preparation is invisible. You can't quantify it in stats. You can't clip it into highlights. You either acknowledge it or you pretend the system deserves the credit. And pretending is easier. The Travis Hunter argument is even weaker. Great quarterbacks always have great weapons. That's how football works. Nobody discredits Mahomes because he had Tyreek Hill. Nobody discredits Brady because he had elite receivers. But somehow, when Shedeur throws to a top-level talent, it becomes evidence that he's being carried. That's not analysis. That's selective logic. What gets ignored is how much responsibility he actually had in that offense. He wasn't just executing a script. He was making pre-snap reads, adjusting plays, identifying coverages, taking hits in the pocket and still delivering accurate throws. None of that comes from a system. That comes from awareness, timing, and confidence. And here's the funny part. The same people who call him a system QB also criticize him for making risky plays. But if he were truly just following a system, he wouldn't be taking risks at all. He'd be playing safe, checking down, avoiding pressure. Instead, he's being criticized for doing the opposite, for trying to extend plays, for pushing the ball, for trusting his arm. So which one is it? Is he being carried by a system, or is he freelancing too much? You can't have both, but narratives don't need consistency. They just need repetition. The system QB label isn't about Shedeur's ability. It's about comfort. It makes people feel smarter. It gives critics a way to sound analytical without actually breaking down tape. And the truth is simple. Systems don't survive bad quarterbacks. Quarterbacks survive bad systems. And Shedeur has already proven he can operate under pressure, chaos, and constant scrutiny. If he were really just a product of the system, he would have collapsed the moment the environment changed. He didn't. At some point, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders stopped being about football and started being about control. Control of the narrative, control of public opinion, control of who gets labeled ready and who gets labeled overhyped. And the people holding that control, the so-called experts, the analysts, the talking heads who build entire careers off sounding confident while rarely being accountable for being wrong. Because if you actually track what's been said about Shedeur over time, the story keeps changing. First it was, he hasn't proven anything. Then it became, okay, he's shown flashes, but it's too early. Then he's still behind. And now it's, let's wait and see. The goalposts never stop moving. No matter what he does, the verdict is always delayed, always conditional, always just out of reach. That's not analysis. That's narrative insurance. It allows media figures to avoid ever fully committing to a take. If he fails, they say, we warned you. If he succeeds, they say, we always said he had potential. Either way, they never lose. And that's exactly why fans are starting to tune them out. What makes it worse is the double standard. When other young quarterbacks struggle, the media talks about development, coaching, situation, supporting cast. When Shedeur struggles, it becomes personal. Suddenly, it's about his decision-making, his readiness, his mentality. The environment disappears from the conversation. Only the player remains. And the irony is, many of these same experts never questioned the systems he was placed into. They didn't question unstable coaching. They didn't question chaotic play calling. They didn't question organizational dysfunction, but they were quick to question him, over and over. Part of that comes from the shadow of Deion Sanders. Some analysts don't want to admit that Deion might actually be right, that his approach works, that his son might really be that disciplined. So instead of evaluating Shedeur as his own player, they evaluate him as a symbol, a storyline, a debate topic. And debates need conflict. They need tension. They need doubt. Nobody tunes in to hear, this kid is solid and developing normally. That doesn't get clicks. But is he overrated? Is he protected? Did he get exposed? Definitely does. So the media keeps recycling the same questions, even when the evidence keeps changing. The most revealing part is how little actual football breakdown happens. Very few analysts talk about his footwork, his reads, his timing, his pocket presence. Instead, they focus on vibes, body language, draft position, headlines, things that feel like analysis but aren't. And that's why the term fake experts fits so well. Not because they know nothing, but because they rarely do the one thing they expect from players. Adjust, learn, evolve. When Shedeur improves, they don't update their perspective. They update their excuses. The media isn't lying about him. They're doing something more subtle. They're stalling the truth, stretching it, delaying it. hoping the audience never notices how often they're wrong. But the results keep piling up, and the longer they avoid acknowledging them, the more obvious the bias becomes. At some point, the experts stop looking like authorities and start looking like spectators trying to catch up. Right now, everything around Shedeur Sanders feels unfinished, unclear, up in the air, and that's mostly because of where he landed. The Cleveland Browns are one of those franchises that always seem to live in transition. New plans, new directions, new visions for the future, but never real stability. And for a young quarterback trying to prove himself, that might be the most dangerous environment of all. From the outside, it looks like opportunity, a chance to compete, a chance to earn a spot, a chance to rise, but inside the organization, it's chaos disguised as patience. Coaches keep using words like growth and potential, but they never actually commit to anything. No clear starter, no long-term plan, no real confidence being shown publicly, just constant hedging. And that creates a weird dynamic. On paper, Shedeur has a chance to win the job, but in reality, it feels like he's being kept in a permanent audition. Every rep is a test. Every mistake is magnified. Every good play is treated like a surprise. He's not being developed. He's being evaluated, over and over again. The problem with that is simple. Quarterbacks don't grow in uncertainty. They grow in structure. They need systems that believe in them, coaches who build around their strengths, playbooks that evolve with their skill set. But the Browns haven't exactly built a reputation for that. Over the years, they've cycled through quarterbacks like experiments. Different styles, different personalities, different philosophies, none of them lasting long enough to build anything real. So now Shedeur walks into that same environment. Same pressure, same expectations, same franchise history hanging over his head, except this time the spotlight is even brighter because he's already controversial, already debated, already carrying narratives that have nothing to do with his actual performance. And here, where the future becomes truly uncertain, if he succeeds, people will say he finally proved it. If he struggles, they'll say he was never ready. There's no neutral outcome, no normal development curve. He's either a breakthrough or a bust, nothing in between. What makes this even more unfair is that organizational mistakes rarely get blamed on the organization. Bad play calling, that's on the QB. Poor protection, that's on the QB. Lack of weapons, that's on the QB. The Browns can reset, rebuild, and rebrand every few years, but Shedeur only gets one reputation. Once it's written, it sticks. So his future isn't just about talent. It's about timing, about patience, about whether the Browns actually commit to a direction or keep drifting like they always have. Because no quarterback thrives in limbo. You either get a real chance or you get slowly erased by indecision. And that's the real tension in this story. Not whether Shedeur can play, not whether he works hard, but whether the environment he's in will ever allow him to fully show it. Because sometimes, the difference between a franchise QB and a what could have been isn't skill. It's stability. When you step back and look at the full story of Shedeur Sanders, it stops being just a football debate. It becomes something bigger, something deeper. This isn't really about stats, draft position, or even starting jobs anymore. It's about how narratives are created, who controls them, and how hard it is to escape a story once the world decides it for you. From the very beginning, Shedeur was never treated like a normal prospect. He was treated like a concept, a symbol, a storyline, the son of Deion Sanders, the Nepo baby, the system QB, the draft fall. Every phase of his career came with a label attached to it before the results were even in. And once those labels existed, everything he did got filtered through them. That's the trap most people don't see. When the media builds a narrative, it doesn't disappear easily. Even when the player improves, the story just adapts. Doubt becomes caution. Criticism becomes concern. And progress becomes potential. The tone shifts, but the skepticism stays. But here's the part that changes everything. Shedeur never tried to fight the narrative. He never went on public rants, never played the victim, never begged for validation. He did the one thing that actually threatens fake stories. He stayed consistent. He worked. He improved. He let time do the talking. And that's why this story is uncomfortable for a lot of people, because it exposes something about the system itself. The system doesn't like being wrong. It doesn't like admitting bias. It doesn't like young players proving that discipline beats perception. So instead of owning mistakes, it stretches the debate, keeps things open, keeps things uncertain, hopes the audience never notices how often the goalposts move. But reality doesn't move. Reality is what happens on the field, in the locker room, in the film room, when nobody's watching. And by every serious measure, Shedeur is doing exactly what you're supposed to do as a developing quarterback. Learning, adjusting, competing, taking pressure and not folding under it. The irony is, the same people who questioned his mindset are now being forced to question their own, because the version of Shedeur they predicted never showed up. The spoiled kid, the protected project, the overrated prospect. None of those characters exist in real life. What exists is a player who understands that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about staying right long enough that they can't ignore you anymore. So the bigger picture isn't about whether Shedeur becomes a superstar, or whether he starts this season, or even whether he stays with one team long-term. The bigger picture is what he already represents. A reminder that hype fades. Narratives collapse. But preparation always survives. And in a world obsessed with opinions, that might be the most dangerous thing of all.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.